Thanks, everyone. It's so wonderful to have you here today. I'm Wendy Singer, Executive Director for No Shame on You, and we want to welcome you to this month's virtual Feed Your Mind series program, Ally Training with the Trevor Project. And we do monthly virtual lunch and learns called Feed Your Mind series each month on different topics. And this is a true honor to have the Trevor Project here today. On behalf of our board of directors, staff, and volunteers, welcome. No shame. For those of you who are new to No Shame on You, No Shame on You is dedicated to eliminating the stigma associated with mental health conditions. So people who need the help will seek it, and family members and friends will know how to provide proper support to their friends and family and to ultimately save lives. We fulfill our mission with a comprehensive community outreach programs, workshops, teen programs, free resources, and a robust online presence with over 120 social media followers. So if you aren't following us yet, please do on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. We partner with organizations throughout the Chicagoland area and across the country, like Trevor Project today, and are recognized for our inclusive, consistent, and responsive programming. I'd like to express the gratitude to our sponsors that were displayed on the pre-roll slideshow today. Before I introduce our speaker today, we are open to Q&A. It's a smaller group today, so please feel free to pop questions into the chat, or you can put them to me anonymously, and I will ask them, so whatever you are comfortable with. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker. We had a little switcheroo today. So as advertised, we were going to have somebody else, but unfortunately, she couldn't make it. But we have been blessed today to have Keygan Miller with us, who is the Director of Public Training for the Trevor Project, the leading suicide prevention and crisis intervention organization for LGBTQ plus young people. Keygan oversees design and facilitation of public trainings to advance Trevor's life-saving suicide prevention work and teach audiences to be strong allies in the LGBTQ plus and to teach audiences to be strong allies for LGBTQ plus youth. Prior to this work, Keygan was an advocacy manager at the Trevor Project, and they served as an intervention specialist for the Cincinnati Public Schools. Keygan received a Master's of Arts in Curriculum and Instruction from University of Cincinnati, as well as a Master's in Education and Human Development and Education Policy from the George Washington University. Keygan's pronouns are they, them, and without further ado, Keygan, thank you for coming today.
Absolutely.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It is such a delight to be here. So as said, my name is Keygan. I use they, them pronouns, and today we're going to do a bit of our allied training. So what today will look like for the next bit of time together. We will talk about the Trevor Project, what we do, the services we offer, and our mission, and how that might be helpful to you in your work. We'll talk about some LGBTQ language considerations, some terminology, some things around gender neutral language and pronouns and all that good stuff that helps us be a good ally to the community. We'll talk a little bit about intersectionality and bias and how we can work to combat that bias, to better support our community. And then finally, we'll leave you with some resources. Now, as said before, there will be time for questions at the end, but if you have questions throughout, please go ahead and pop those into the chat. Or you can message Wendy directly if you would like it to stay anonymous. That's cool too. Also, feel free to put comments or thoughts that you have as we go through, and there'll be a couple of spaces for interaction as well. So we'll definitely be using that chat function today. Some things to keep in mind: this is just the beginning. The conversations that we start here today should continue beyond this space. I always like to say what's said in these sessions stays here, but what's learned here leaves here. So I hope you'll take something from today's session back into your day-to-day life and work. I also want to recognize that people have different levels of experience and knowledge about today's topics. So for some people, this is a refresher course, and for others, this is brand new material. Wherever you are on your journey, you are welcome here. And finally, I just ask that you keep an open mind, be non-judgmental to the materials, yourself, each other as we go through this session. Keep this as a place of learning and growing in community together. So the Trevor Project is the leading suicide prevention and crisis intervention organization for LGBTQ young people. Our mission is to end LGBTQ youth suicide, but our true goal is to help every LGBTQ young person see a bright future for themselves. Now, the way that we do that work is in two ways, intervention and prevention work. So our intervention is what typically people do know us for, and that is our lifeline, chat, and text. And you can see there on your screen the variety of ways that folks can reach out to us. So you can call us at our lifeline, the number is there. You can go to our website, thetrevorproject.org, and there's a big old help button up in the corner that you can click on, or you can text START to 678 678. No matter how someone reaches out to us, we are there 24/7, 365 days a year. Folks are met with trained crisis counselors. Those counselors are trained not only in how to respond to crisis, but they're also trained on LGBTQ identities, on LGBTQ common crisis concerns. Just makes having that conversation a lot easier. We know from our national survey that LGBTQ youth really appreciate having that LGBTQ specific service and would prefer that over general crisis contacts. Now, that being said, the other way to access LGBTQ specific programming right now and crisis services is through 988. So 988 is the national lifeline number. That's accessible to anyone in the United States. Anyone can call that for whether they're actively suicidal or whether they just need a listening ear. 988 is there for that. But 988 offers specialized services. They offer 3 different kinds right now. First is Spanish speaking language services. There's also veteran-specific services, and currently there is also LGBTQ-specific services. So you can dial 988, choose the right number, and get LGBTQ-specific services. Trevor operates one of the crisis centers that offers that specific service. That said, you'll notice I said currently. Unfortunately, a leaked draft budget from the administration has shown that they are not planning on funding LGBTQ specific services going forward. So after September, we of course are pushing back against that, trying to get it fully funded. So highly recommend calling your legislators to tell them to support it. But nonetheless, we'll keep working. And no matter what, our crisis counseling programs, our classic services will always be there for LGBTQ young people. Now, we do focus our services on folks who are 24 and under. That said, if anyone reaches out to us, we will definitely serve them. Then we have our prevention side of the house, where I always think about it like it's my job to work myself out of a job, right? I want a world where our young people don't experience crisis to begin with. So the way that we do that work, there are 4 main programs that I want to highlight. The first is our Trevor Space. Trevor Space is a safe space social networking site for LGBTQ young people. It's a way for our young people to get online, talk with one another, build community and connection, which we know is one of the strongest protective factors. Trevor Space is available for folks ages 13 to 24, but there are some safety measures put in place that are like age segregated. So for example, direct messaging between participants is limited to folks who are under 17 together and folks who are 18 to 24 together. So maintaining some safety while still building community, right? Additionally, we have moderators who are watching Trevor Space to make sure that there's no inappropriate content, or if someone's in crisis, getting them connected to our crisis services, those types of things. So really it's about maintaining a safe space for our young people to connect with one another. Then we have our more adult-facing resources. So we have our research team, which puts out regular evaluations and surveys about LGBTQ youth mental health, most notably our national survey that comes out every other year. On the opposite years of our national survey is our 50 state report. So it takes that national survey and breaks it down by state. So if you're interested in what is happening in your own state, you can find that research on our website. Today, I'm going to be talking from a national lens. So most of the statistics I speak about that come from our national survey will be that national space. But if you're interested in what's happening where you are, you can definitely check that out. Then we have our advocacy team, which works at local, state, and federal levels to advocate for LGBTQ young people. Unfortunately, in the last several years, that work has been primarily focused on um, pushing back against anti-LGBTQ bills. So there have been a lot of anti-LGBTQ bills, such as don't say gay bills in schools, book bans, um, bans on gender affirming care, bans on trans athletes, right? There's all sorts of stuff that's happening that is very anti-LGBTQ. Um, and so a lot of their work has been in that. But there is some positive stuff happening too, things like banning conversion therapy, getting non-discrimination policies in places, getting schools to have suicide prevention policies, those types of things. So they definitely have their work cut out for them in advocacy. And then our education team, which I might be a little bit biased, but it's my favorite, where we seek to educate primarily youth serving adults, making sure that adults have all the resources in their back pockets to provide safe and affirming environments, know how to respond to crisis, those types of things. So why we do this work, why this work is so important, to like really look at that, we want to look at suicidality as a whole in the United States. So we know that suicide is preventable, but it continues to be a growing health problem in the US. Over the last couple of decades, the suicide rate has increased by about 37%, making it the ninth leading cause of death for folks 10 to 64 in the United States. But if I narrow that down a little bit and I just look at my young people, it's the second leading cause of death for folks 10 to 14 and the third leading cause of death for folks 15 to 24. Now, in case you're wondering, what's the first leading cause? It's accidental death, unintentional injury, which if you think about, we do a lot to prevent that first leading cause of death, right? We have seatbelt laws, we have lifeguards, we have campaigns to get kids to wear helmets when riding their bike, right? We do so much to prevent that first leading cause of death. We could be doing just as much to prevent suicide. But that is all young people. If I narrow it down even further and I just look at my LGBTQ young people, we find that they are 4 times more likely than their peers to seriously consider attempting suicide. In fact, on our most recent survey, 39% of LGBTQ young people said that they had seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year. If I take that percentage and I take a conservative estimate of how many LGBTQ youth there are in this country, we find that more than 1.8 million LGBTQ youth seriously consider suicide each and every year in the United States alone. That is why this work is so important and why providing safe and affirming spaces is so important for our young people. Now, I say all of this, and I don't want us to think that LGBTQ young people are inherently prone to suicide risk because of who they are, right? It's not about their identity. Rather, they're placed at higher risk because of the mistreatment and stigmatization that they face in society. For example, 60% of our young people reported experiencing discrimination based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. And as you might imagine, that level of discrimination is not too good for one's mental health and well-being. In fact, when LGBTQ young people face discrimination, they were twice as likely than their peers to seriously consider attempting suicide. Twice as likely. And then when our young people need help, are they able to get it? And the answer there is unfortunately largely no. 84% of our LGBTQ youth reported wanting counseling from a mental health provider. But of that 84%, 50% of those were unable to receive that care in the past year. Now, there's many reasons why that is. The 3 main kind of categories are accessibility, so things like affordability, health insurance, coverage, transportation, that kind of stuff. The second area is more around stigma, which this organization is working on, but stigma of like not wanting people to think there's something wrong with them, or not wanting to ask permission for care, or not thinking that it wouldn't work, those types of things. So anything stigma related. And then the third area is more around LGBTQ competent care. So is my therapist going to out me to my parents as being LGBTQ? Or is my therapist going to understand my identity as an LGBTQ person, right? So anything we can do to help increase access to care, whether that's direct access, whether that's reducing stigma, or whether that's making sure care that is provided is competent, LGBTQ competent. Anything we do in those areas is going to help get our LGBTQ young people the help that they need and deserve. Now, a lot of those are really stark statistics, right? And it's heavy. So I want us to like take a nice deep breath because it's not all bad. All right. We also want to look at protective factors. We want to look at those things that increase resiliency in our young people. And one of the things that we know from our research is that when LGBTQ youth report feeling accepted by adults in their life, it lowers their odds of attempting suicide by up to 40%. And the best news of that is oftentimes it only takes one accepting adult to make all of that difference. Just one. You have the ability to be that accepting adult in a young person's life. That's the good news. But then also imagine what it looks like if I build a community of affirming adults and the impact that that can have on my young people's mental health and well-being. Okay, so that's what we want to do is we want to be that one person. We want to build that community. So how do we do that? Well, we do that through allyship work. So in the chat, I would love for you to tell me, when you think of the word ally, what comes to mind for you? When you hear the word ally or the term allyship, what comes to mind? Non-judgmental, supporter, upstander, support, accepting. Yes, absolutely. All of that's true. Friend, yes. Trusting, oof, yes, for sure. Jonathan, I'm not gonna lie, my dyslexia totally turned your misspelling into the right word to begin with. I was like, wait, what? Working together to fight injustice, advocate. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so allyship is supporting a community that's not your own, but it must be active. It requires doing the work, right? Now, part of that work is educating yourself, which you're doing right now. Well done. Um, but it has to be doing something. So it could be something like actively listening to someone talk about their experience. It could be standing up for someone when we see harassment or discrimination happening. It could be calling your legislator. Mark how many times I say that today. It could be actively celebrating LGBTQ identities, right? There's so many ways that we can be an ally, and today we're going to talk about a bunch of different ways. But you have to be doing something. It's not just saying I'm an ally. So the question that we always pose to folks to think about is, would the community you ally yourself with consider you to be an ally? And really like think about that question, right? If the answer is yes, great, keep doing whatever it is you're doing. But the answer is like, I don't know, maybe, maybe not, or no, then I encourage you to think about one thing you can do going forward. Just one thing we can do that's showing the work, that shows that, we are that ally. And I also like to point out that even as an LGBTQ person, I can be an ally to other people in my community, right? Like I don't have the same experience as a trans woman has. And so I can be an ally to trans women in many ways, right? And so it's it's open to everyone. Allyship is here for us, but we have to do the work. All right. So one of the things that we should do as active allies is we should understand the common language that's used within the community. And so we're going to go over a couple of terms today just to make sure we're all on the same page around these words. Now, let's do it in a kind of a pop quiz style, if you will. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pop up a term on the screen. I'm going to read it out loud. And if you think you know what that word is, go ahead and put it in the chat. And even if you're like, I think it's this thing, and you have to put question marks behind it, that's okay. Just be brave, be bold, give it a guess. All right. First one, a collection of physical characteristics and personal mannerisms that society associates with a particular sex. What do we think that is? Stereotype, that's a good guess. I like it. And to be frank, this is based a lot on stereotypes. What we're looking for there is gender. And again, gender is based on a lot of stereotypes, so not entirely wrong. But gender is a societal construct. We build our understanding of gender collectively together. And depending on what era you grew up in, what culture you grew up in, what your parents said, what your religion said, all those things influence our understanding of gender. And gender shifts and changes over time as well. For example, let's talk about high heels for a minute, right? So in our current society, high heels are considered to be feminine, right? Doesn't matter who's wearing them, it's still a feminine trait. Has that always been the case, though? No, I'm seeing head shakes. No, no, I can look back as recent as like disco and club kid era, right? Heels were for everyone, nice big platforms, right? But I can look back even further. Roman Empire, Napoleon, right? These military officials were wearing heels. Now, they weren't wearing stilettos. That would be ridiculous. But they were wearing heels. Heels locked into stirrups easier. They made you look taller and more imposing, right? There were lots of reasons why they were considered to be a more masculine trait. It's the same time an era that things like wigs and tights and makeup were also considered to be masculine, right? But that shifted. It changed over time. Um, and so, same we can be said for like things like the color pink, right? In the early 1800s, pink was considered to be masculine and blue was feminine. There's a lot of like color theory to as why that was, but nonetheless, that changed in the early 1900s. Around the same time, we get mass media marketing, which now, says, oh, you had a baby girl, you should dress her in pink and give her a pink nursery, right? And oh, you had a baby boy, you should dress him in blue and give him blue things. Oh, you had one and then the other? Well, now you need to buy all new things, right? Clearly can't dress, the second child in the same thing that the first one had. That doesn't work. Capitalism influences gender. And I say that, and I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a data point. I actually think it could be a good thing if we do it right. So if we know gender shifts and changes over time, we have evidence of this, then gender can shift and change again. And perhaps it can be more expansive, more inclusive of more people. And we can use all these tools that shift and change and shape gender and our understanding of it to get us there. A really great example of this actually was Target a few years ago. They used to have gendered toy aisles, right? So in the girls aisle, you had things like Barbies and baby dolls, but you also had things like kitchen sets and laundry sets and things like that, right? And then in the boy aisles, you had things like cars and trucks and stuff like that, but you also had things like science kits and engineering and Legos and building blocks and stuff, right? And so Target decided it was going to do away with gendered aisles and just start labeling things like this is the Barbie and baby aisle. This is the car aisle. This, right? They just labeled it by what it was in it. So they degendered their aisles, making it more accessible to everyone. Now, I would argue that that was probably to help their bottom line and sell more things. But it also helped us reimagine what toys were gendered for what reason, right? So we can use these tools to help us be a little bit more inclusive, a little bit more expansive. All right, enough about this one. Let's move to the next one. Someone's innermost concept of self as masculine, feminine, a blend of both, another gender, a set of gender, or even lack of gender. What do we think that is? Good. Gender identity, exactly. So we had societal gender floating around out here, and we take a piece of that and claim it for ourselves. And that claiming it for ourselves, that's our gender identity. Everyone has a gender identity. Everyone has one. Some people just don't have to think about theirs as hard as others. That's all. Um, I actually wish that everyone would think about their gender identity like just a smidgen more. Like if I could assign everyone a journaling assignment, I'd be like, okay, write on the following 5 questions. Number one, what is my gender identity? Number two, when did I first know that was my gender identity? Maybe it was today because we just learned we had a gender identity. I don't know. Number two, how do I know that's my gender identity? Number three, what parts of my gender, or number four, sorry, what parts of my gender identity am I comfortable with? And number five, what parts of my gender identity am I uncomfortable with? I think if we all answered those questions for ourselves, we'd be much better off as a society because two things would happen simultaneously. Number one, we would understand ourselves a little bit better. And when we understand ourselves better, then what other people are doing doesn't matter as much. And that reduces fear. And fear is one of the biggest pushers of all the anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ stuff that we're seeing right now. So if we understood ourselves a bit better, maybe that would reduce that. The other thing that it would do is it would give us a little bit of perspective, perhaps a little bit of empathy to the questions that trans people ask themselves and are asked by other people. And a little empathy goes a long way. So if you want a journaling assignment, go write about your gender identity. See what comes up of it. All right. How about this next one? The ways in which a person presents himself to the world through hairstyles, clothing, toys, preferences, mannerisms, etc. What do we think that is? Good. Gender expression. Exactly. So we had societal gender out here floating around. We took and claimed a piece of that as our identity, and then we put it back out into the world. And that putting it back out into the world, that's our gender expression. Now, more people do tend to think about their gender expression than their gender identity. For example, when you got up this morning and put on some clothes, part of your decision probably involved gender expression. Now, that might not have been the full thing. You might have, taken professionalism or comfortability or something as well, but gender expression was definitely probably a piece of it. Now, sometimes our gender expression and our gender identity do not align. And I want to talk about a couple of reasons why that is. First, I'm going to highlight is safety. And this is one I think lots of people can understand, is that sometimes it is unsafe to express your gender in the world in the way that you want to, right? Now, that's particularly true for folks like trans women of color who experience disproportionate rates of harassment, assault, and violence in this country. But it's true for a lot of people. Like, have you ever, or do you know anyone who has ever decided not to wear that short skirt or not to wear those heels because they were walking home late at night by themselves? That's curbing your gender expression to maintain safety, right? So that's one reason someone's identity and expression might not align. Another reason is economic reasons, and I'll use myself as an example of this. I was a student teacher. I was an undergrad student teaching at the time that I came out as trans. And so, I was working all day for free, going to school at night, not a lot of disposable income. So I couldn't like upend my entire wardrobe and start express when I came out and started expressing my gender in the way that I wanted to in the world. I had to work on building it up and a lot of thrifting and whatever to get my clothing to match what I wanted to, how I identified, right? So economic reasons, safety, both reasons why someone's expression and identity might not align. But frankly, no one owes anyone any particular gender expression. Like we should all feel free to express ourselves in whatever way makes us most comfortable. All right, how about this one? Commonly defined as patterns of emotional, romantic, and or sexual attraction to another person or people. Yeah. I'll take sexuality for sure. Also take sexual orientation. Either one works just fine. The big thing here is that it's not just about sexual attraction. Too often, the LGBTQ community gets hypersexualized. It all becomes about who's sleeping with who, which, while important, is not the only aspect of relationships. It's not the only aspect of attraction, right? We also want to look at emotional and romantic. We want to look at the relationship aspect of those things as well. All right, and then how about this one? An umbrella term used to describe someone who is a sexual or gender minority, aka not heterosexual or cisgender. Historically, this word has been used as a slur, but it's being increasingly reclaimed. Yeah, good. Queer, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about reclaimed words. So some reclaimed words in certain communities are meant for that community only. There are words within the queer community that is true for, but there are words in other communities as well where people have reclaimed that word and it can be used by members of that community, but shouldn't be used by anyone else. Then there are words that are reclaimed by a community that can be used by anyone as long as it's being used appropriately, right? Queer is one of those words where you are welcome to use it as long as your intention and tonality are good. So we're not gonna like drive by someone on the road and holler out the window queer at them, right? That would be rude. But if we're saying, oh, it's, they're part of the queer community, or oh, the queer community is having a big event this weekend, whatever, like that, right? That is perfectly fine. Neuroqueer, okay. I now want to read your dissertation, Jonathan. Um, Again, it's fine to use. Now, it is important to note that some people are going to be uncomfortable with the word queer. And if they're uncomfortable, we always want to mirror the language that a person uses for themselves. And so if someone's uncomfortable with the word, we just don't use it around them. It's that simple. Oh, we have some academics in the room and I love it. Okay. So there are a ton of different identity terms out there in the world that fit under the guise of gender identity or gender expression or sexual orientation. And I encourage you to look up those words, to read different glossaries on different LGBTQ sites, all that stuff. It's very important to know more about those words. But today we are limited to an hour, so we're going to move on. But continue your education. Educating ourselves is an act of allyship. Um, so let's talk about another piece of language. Let's talk about pronouns. Pronouns are one of the simplest and easiest ways that we can support trans and non-binary folks. And why this is so important. When we asked trans and non-binary young people what pronouns they used, 75% said they used he, him, his, or she, her, her. So binary pronouns. The key there is using the appropriate one for the person as they desire, right? But 25% of our trans and non-binary young people said they use pronouns beyond the binary. So maybe they use a combination of pronouns, a singular they, them, or maybe they use neo-pronouns. And why this is important is because when trans and non-binary young people said their pronouns were respected most or all of the time, their suicide attempt rate was half of the rate of those whose pronouns weren't respected. Half. So like TLDR, pronoun use is suicide prevention. But like what's actually happening there? What's actually happening is we're saying to someone by using their correct pronouns, we're saying, I see you, I believe you, I accept you, and affirm you for who you are. And it's that affirming space that we're creating that ultimately lowers mental health issues, including suicidality. It's all about creating affirming environments. So let's make sure we're using pronouns correctly. We're used to using pronouns she, her, hers, herself, he, him, his, himself. Those are easy. Again, just use the right ones for the people who ask for you to use them. We also are used to using they, them, theirs, themselves as singular gender neutral pronouns. We do it all the time. We just don't realize that we do it. For example, if we were in a physical room together and we all got up to leave and there was a phone left on the table, right? I might say out loud, hey, someone left their phone. I hope they come back for it. They're going to miss it. Now, none of us believe that phone belongs to more than one person, right? We know from context that that phone's one person. I just don't know their gender. So we can do the same thing when talking about individual people. We can use a singular they, them. We use it in the same way linguistically that we would use it for a plural. So it's still they are speaking, not they is speaking. But I just use context to tell me that it's one person versus many people. There are also folks who use neopronouns, neo meaning new. Now, how new they are when they're like 30 or 40 years old at this point, we can have that discussion later, but nonetheless, neopronouns. If you think about each pronoun line as a set, right? So like she, her, hers, herself is one pronoun set. There are many different sets of neopronouns. Z here, here's herself, and Z, zir, zir, zir self are two examples. Now, is it here versus zir? That's a personal choice that a person will make for themselves. But the way I use those, Z is speaking, I listen to here, the backpack is here's, or Z is speaking, I listen to zir, the backpack is zir's. It's possible that when you hear a neopronoun that you've never heard it before, and you're like, I don't know how to use that in a sentence. That's okay. Just ask. For most people that I've met that use neopronouns, they're not offended if you say, hey, I don't know how to use that appropriately. Can you give me a few sentence examples of how to use your pronouns correctly? Most are just excited that you really want to do it right and get it right, right? And so maybe they'll give you some sample sentences, write them down, practice them. So Z is a gender neutral version of she, he, or they, right? So it's just a singular gender neutral pronoun. Yeah. And there are other sets of pronouns out there. I'll drop a few in the chat. So you can see like there's a variety of neopronouns out there. And again, it's okay if you don't know how to use them when you first hear them. It takes practice. Just ask for some guidance and folks will be willing to help you, I'm certain. And also, practicing someone's pronouns is definitely an act of allyship. Let's be clear. People are going to choose what pronouns work best for them. That may or may not align with any particular identity or expression. Some people might say that they use any or all pronouns. If that's the case, we can literally use any pronoun for them. You're not going to be wrong, no matter what you do. All right. Other people might use more than one set of pronouns. So they might say, I use they and she pronouns, which means you can use she, her, hers, herself, or they, them, theirs, themselves. Doesn't matter which one of those sets you use. You can change them out as much as you like. Those are both options for that person. Some people might not use any pronouns at all. If that's the case, we just use their name over and over again. Now, English speakers, we don't like how that sounds because it's repetitive, and that's why we have pronouns to begin with, but it is grammatically correct. Just takes practice. If you mess up someone's pronouns, because it happens, apologize and move on. And what I mean by that is what we're not going to do is this. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I keep messing up your pronouns. It's just, I've always known you as this and I'm trying to get it right. Right. That's making it all about us, right? And how difficult it is for us. That's not what we want to do. Instead, we can say something to the effect of, I'm sorry. Earlier, I messed up your pronouns. I know you use he, him pronouns. I'm going to do that better going forward. Right? It makes it about getting it right. We've stated that we're sorry. We've stated what we know to be true, which helps check to make sure that's accurate. And we've said we're going to do better. So now it's our job to do better. Right? The last thing I'll say about pronouns is that sometimes when people have changed their pronouns, it can be difficult for us to to get our brains on board with that, right? It takes some time and some energy. That's okay. I have a quick trick for practicing people's pronouns. So I would suggest setting an alarm on your phone to go off once a day at a time convenient to you. And when it goes off, I want you to speak out loud 3 positive affirmations about that person using their correct pronouns. Now, what does this do? Well, the first thing it does is it helps retrain our neural pathways. So right now, maybe you have a neural pathway that's sending you down the she, her, hers track. We needed to go down the he, him, his track. Well, I have to build that muscle. I have to build those new neural pathways, right? So by saying it out loud 3 times a day correctly, I'm starting to build that. Unfortunately, those neural pathways are a bit like a dirt road at the moment, a little bumpy, right? So we need to strengthen it. By saying positive affirmations, we're actually sending our brains a boost of serotonin. And that serotonin is like delicious in our brains, and our brains are like, yes, give me more. So we're more likely to do it right the next time because our brain's like, yeah, it tasted delicious. Let's go, right? And then the final thing is that when we say nice things about people when they're not around, we tend to be nicer to them when they are around. So while you're working on getting a person's pronouns correct, you're going to be nicer to them. And I guarantee you that any trans person could use a little bit more niceness in the world. I promise you. All right. So we're going to do that every day, each day, 3 times, three statements, positive affirmations using the correct pronoun every day, each day until we get it right every single time. Once we get it right every single time, turn off that alarm, move on with life. You got it. All right. Great way to practice. All right. Any questions about pronouns before I move on?
I just want to ask real quick, just so I understand, the examples that you put in the chat, they could be interchangeable. They could be interchangeable. And some people might have a preference, no preference to any of them.
Yeah, it's all about what a person has chosen for themselves. So they might say, I want this set, and you say, great, that is what I use over and over. They might say, I don't care, you use whatever. We can do that. So yeah, those are just examples of different sets that we've seen here at Trevor when we ask people what pronouns do you use.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, Jonathan, I love it. When I first came up with that idea, I was like, oh, this works. And then I tried it out a couple times for myself with some folks I was struggling with, and it does work. So really helpful. Okay, some other language considerations. Let's talk about oh, Julia, in the example of who left the phone behind, one would say who left his or her phone. Right. Well, but we don't, right? In normal conversational parlance, we don't say that. In academic writing, we do. Although that's changing over time, and some depending on what formatting you're using depends on what they recommend versus like he versus he or she or they. It depends on the again format. But in normal parlance, most of us will say they. And that's the thing. Yeah, I know. Yeah, English teachers always are my struggle. But we've been using they since Shakespeare, so we we can get it together. I have faith. I mean, if you really want to be really, Englishy on it, we can go back to using thee and thou. I'm here for that life. Because thee and thou are gender neutral, aren't they? I'm here for Old English. Let's go. Um anyway. Okay. Other pieces of language that we use in our common everyday language are things that might be gendered, like things like ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. And I know this is one that I get a lot of flack for, but guys, like, hey guys, it's not gender neutral. It's not. I promise you, you're leaving out half the population. So if we can use gender neutral terms in replace of some of those gendered language, we can be more inclusive. So there are informal ways, there are formal ways of using gender neutral terms. This slide was shared with me by a first grade teacher. Mileage may vary with peepadoodles, but okay. But if you were a first grade teacher and you're like, okay, peepadoodles, let's line up at the door. It's cute. It's adorable. It's precious. Um, I don't know, maybe you can get away with that with your colleagues. I don't, live your life. But we can be formal. We can say esteemed colleagues and guests, right? We can be very formal. We can be semi-formal, team, right? Scholars, folks, friends, right? There's so many options. I use friends a lot because in my context, that makes sense for what I'm doing. Use what works best for you. I worked with an organization that trained high school students to be peer leaders. And they not only wanted a gender neutral way of addressing their students, but they wanted a way to reinforce that student's role. So they literally just used peer leaders to address the group. So it was like, okay, peer leaders, listen up. This is what we're going to do next. So it was gender neutral and it reinforced the idea that this person is a peer leader. When I was a math teacher, if I'm addressing my class, okay, mathematicians, we're going to do this problem. It's reinforcing that role, that idea that, oh, I'm a mathematician. I can do math, right? How cool. And it's gender neutral, so it includes everyone. So I don't know, maybe you can get away with red jazz cats, but no matter what, find what works for you and start inserting that in place of gendered terms so we can be more inclusive. Let's talk a little bit about names. Names are the other piece of language that oftentimes changes for trans and non-binary folks. Names show up on everything, and they are even like I changed my name back in 2018, and my old name still shows up on things, including my student loans, which I told them I shouldn't have to pay if they don't get my name right, but they don't listen. But anyway, it's hard to change your name. There's a lot of legal red tape, plus court fees and things like that, and then you have to change it on all these other places as well. There's a lot of barriers to that, so sometimes people can't change their name immediately or ever. And so recognizing that someone's legal name might not be the name that we should be calling them is really important. And we should always call a person by the name that they've chosen for themselves. And frankly, if we don't need to know their legal name, then we don't need to know it. So like, obviously there are reasons you need to know someone's legal name, like if you're filing insurance claims or if you're filing legal documents or things like that, right? That makes sense. But most people don't need to know someone's legal name. We just need to know what to call the person. So keep that in mind. Another little plug here for some language that we don't use anymore, which is the term preferred in front of name or pronouns. So in the past, we might have said, oh, what are your preferred pronouns? But preferred is kind of weird because it indicates that there's a choice, right? So like if I said, what ice cream do you prefer? Well, I prefer chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream, but I will eat chocolate if that is all you have. My pronouns aren't like that. I use they, them pronouns. I don't use anything else. There's not a choice there. So instead of using the term preferred, just you can say, what are your pronouns? Or if you're having someone fill out a form, pronouns with a blank behind it. For name, sometimes you have to differentiate between legal name and chosen name. So you can say that, legal name, chosen name. And P.S., chosen name works for more than just trans people, right? If William is the legal name, but they go by Billy, that's their chosen name is Billy. It's helpful for everyone. Disproportionately impacts trans people, of course, but useful for everyone. Another thing I've seen is like legal name and name I go by. So those are choices for how we can differentiate if we need to. Some final thoughts on language. We want to mirror the language a person uses when talking about their identity. And if someone shares an identity with you that you're unfamiliar with, you can use the affirming exploration technique to figure out more. So if someone uses a term and you're like, I have no idea what that is, you don't have to say that. You can just say, thanks for sharing that with me. A lot of people use that term in different ways. So when you say you identify as, can you tell me what that means to you? It's a really cool way of learning more about the person and learning more about their identity. And if you don't know what the identity means to begin with, you're learning that language too, without othering or making it weird, right? The affirming exploration technique is actually useful for more than just LGBTQ identities too. Like I think like of like religion, for example, like if someone tells me they're Catholic, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So I can be like, thanks for sharing that with me. When you say you identify as Catholic, what does that mean for you? It's a really neat way to learn, right? All right, let's talk a little bit about coming out. So coming out is the process in which someone shares their identity, either their sexual orientation or gender identity, with themselves or others. And it's really important when someone comes out that a couple of things happen. One, they are sharing something vulnerable with you, right? Thank them for that. Realize that you are being a trusted person in that moment. So make sure you're thanking them for that, for sharing. The second thing is that person probably needs some sort of support. It might just mean that they need to be affirmed. It might mean that they need extra support somewhere else. There's something that they probably need though. So the first thing out of your mouth should be, thank you for sharing that with me. How can I best support you? If you start there, if you start with that statement, or that question rather, I guess, you're going to be miles ahead of everyone else in the world. Trust. Thank you for sharing that with me. How can I best support you? By the way, that's a really good statement for mental health issues as well. If someone's sharing about their mental health at that moment, thank you for sharing that with me. How can I best support you? What a great statement, right? So start there. The next thing about people coming out is that we don't want to out other people to others, right? So we don't want to assume that anyone knows. We don't want to, out someone unwillingly, because sometimes it's unsafe to be out, right? People have lost jobs, people have lost housing, people have lost their friends and family because they come out. And so we don't want to accidentally or intentionally out someone. Now, that said, sometimes in order to be respectful, we run the risk of outing someone. For example, if someone says, hey, I'm trans, I'd like you to use this name and these pronouns for me. You want to be respectful and use that name and those pronouns, right? But you could accidentally out them as well. So this is a great time to ask some questions, and do things that promote joy, choice, and safety. So if someone says, hey, I'd like you to use this new name and pronouns for me, great. Thank you for sharing that. I want to check in. Are there people you're not out with? Or how would you like me to refer to you or talk about your identity with this group? So for example, when I was teaching, I would say to my student, happy to use that name and pronouns for you. Should I do that with your classmates? Should I do that with your other teachers? Should I do that with your parents? And then whatever they say, I follow. So if they say, yeah, use it everywhere. Okay, great, cool. Love that for us. But if they say, oh, no, my parents don't know, so please don't do that around them. Okay. That means that I'm going to have to use two different sets of pronouns, two different names. But that's how we're going to keep them safe. So we're going to do that. It's going to take some extra mental power, but we can do it. This is also the power of gender neutral language though. So now when I talk to their parents, do you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say your child, my student. Not gendered. It's technically correct. It is their child. It is my student, right? So again, follow that person's lead always. Again, I would like to point out how many things that are about LGBTQ identities that also go along with mental health. Same thing goes with mental health diagnoses and mental health help, right? Someone can come to you and say, hey, I'm having this concern or this issue, or I've been diagnosed with whatever. We don't share that with everyone else, right? But we do ask them, how do we support you? We do say, who should I share this with and who shouldn't I? How can I, where do I step in and be a good ally in this moment? Yeah, that's a good policy, Jonathan. All right, I want to take a brief moment to speak about intersectionality. Today, we've talked a lot about LGBTQ identities, and that's important. But we also have to recognize that LGBTQ people aren't a monolith, and we bring a lot of overlapping identities that create these systems of privilege and oppression. And so if we're not recognizing someone's race or ability or class or any of those things alongside of their LGBTQ identity, we're doing a disservice to that person. And so we want to recognize that like minority stress is real. People who occupy marginalized social positions are more likely to have higher rates of mental health issues as well as suicide risk due to increased stigma, discrimination, and rejection from others. And those who hold multiple marginalized social positions are more likely to see even greater risk, right? And so we want to definitely address that. So I'm gonna leave you today with a few things. First, allyship is actionable and consistent. It is doing the work regularly. And there are many ways to be an ally. Here's some final reminders. Exercise empathy. It is the best form of communication. Check your own biases and demonstrate respect. We don't have to understand or agree with someone to respect them. Use inclusive language. That means mirroring the language, being intentional about what we ask and say. A lot of LGBTQ folks are asked about their identities and asked to share about their identities, but they're not compensated for that emotional labor. And so we want to give people respect and listen to them when they're talking about their identities, but also give people the space to say, I don't want to talk about that right now. We want to facilitate inclusive pronoun practices, not only using people's pronouns correctly and consistently, but also sharing our pronouns as a normal practice. PS, on things like Zoom here, you can scroll over your face or your name, and there's a 3-dot button in the corner, and you can click on it, and you can hit the rename button, and then you can put your pronouns behind your name. Really good signal of allyship. Wherever your name goes, your pronouns can follow. Again, it helps normalize that for trans and non-binary folks. Speak out against harassment, discrimination, biases, and microaggressions. Be an upstander, not a bystander. Provide and advocate for gender inclusive facilities, whether that's bathrooms, locker rooms, inpatient care spaces. All those spaces need to have inclusive facilities for trans and non-binary people. Encourage and facilitate self-advocacy. Self-advocacy is a form of resiliency. But that means that we need to be amplifying LGBTQ voices, making connections in the community, promoting positive media representation. The more we see ourselves, the better we all are. Keep educating yourself. Look up those local mental health resources and LGBTQ resources before you need them. And then advocate for change, whether that's within your own company, organization, school, whether that's within state or federal legislation. I'll say it one more time, call your legislators, tell them to support LGBTQ people, tell them to support mental health, right? All those things are super important. Where can you learn more? Check out our friends over at Out and Equal and the Human Rights Campaign if you're interested in like workplace inclusion. They have a lot of great resources on that. If you're interested in youth mental health, LGBTQ youth mental health, check out the trevorproject.org/research. That'll get you to our national survey, our 50 state report, as well as our monthly research briefs. And then check out the trevorproject.org/resources to get to our coming out guide, our guide to being an ally to trans and non-binary people, and so much more for LGBTQ young people and their supporters. Finally, if you're looking for an action that you can take, I highly recommend. Oop, that is not what I meant to do. Well, that works actually. There we go. Now I don't know what screen I'm showing. Is my face showing up there? Okay, great. Thank you. I was trying to grab this link. The link I just dropped in the chat will help us share our next national survey out. So if you know LGBTQ young people ages 13 to 24, share that link and have them take that survey. The more our young people take that, the more we know about what's going on and how we can best help. Finally, let me be a resource to you. That's my email there. Feel free to reach out. We bring this ally training as well as care training and other things out into the community, into local community schools, nonprofits, businesses, etc. So reach out to us if we can be of any assistance or provide any resources to you. And then finally, I would love your feedback. If you can go to that QR code or the tiny URL, I would love to hear from you today what was helpful, what could be improved in the future, all that good jazz. And with that, I know that we are at overtime. Thank you for being such an attentive audience. I will stick around for questions if anyone has anything. But thank you so much.
Keygan, you rock. You are such a good presenter and just were so down to earth and easy to listen to. And I felt like we learned a lot. And I'm getting some great comments in the chat. Just for thank you everyone for attending. I also threw a survey into the chat if you have time to do it. If you don't, just do one of them and we will share. And just thank you for being here today. If you are local to the Chicago area, we have a really cool program coming up on this Sunday. Our teen advisory board is hosting a documentary screening called Our Turn to Talk. It's a really cool story about documentary about stories of teens throughout the United States from all different backgrounds, all different places, and talking about mental health so that we can eliminate the stigma, which is what we're all about. And there's a link in the chat for more information about that. And wonderful. Keygan, I see one question that we missed that someone asked. Is there a chance that you could share a PDF of your slides? And
Yeah,
if
we can
not, that's
definitely,
okay.
yeah, we can definitely share that PDF with you. And then if you want to send it out to participants, that would be great.
Wonderful. We'll stick around, like Keygan said, in our virtual lobby if anyone wants to unmute and say hello or chat. I call this our virtual lobby, our virtual hangout. But thanks everyone for attending and for being here and being an ally.